Officer Derek Hayes pressed the barrel of his gun against the side of her head and said, in a low voice full of contempt, "You people always think you belong somewhere you don't." Those words fell heavy, sharp, and cruel. Judge Aisha Thompson stood very still, her breath slow, her eyes steady. She had shown her badge. She had repeated her name. She had spoken calmly. She had done everything a law-abiding citizen, a respected public official, and a human being is expected to do. But none of that mattered to Derek. His hand did not tremble. His certainty did not falter. In his mind, she was not a judge. She was not a leader. She was not a woman running late to court. She was only a black face that he decided did not belong. And for a moment, the air held still, the world narrowing to the weight of that gun and the long shadow of history behind it. Before we go into this story, where you are watching, please subscribe to the channel and give a like, so more people can see and feel this. Thank you. Aisha did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She knew what could happen if she spoke the wrong word. She had seen it before. She had lived it before. Derek's partner, Officer Ryan Caldwell, shifted nervously at her side. His voice shook slightly as he said, "Derek, maybe we should slow down." She showed identification. "We need to confirm before we escalate." But Derek did not want to slow down. Derek's anger was not about procedure. It was instinct, learned and sharpened over years of unchecked behavior. He was the son of a police officer who once told him, "Respect is something we decide who gets." Derek believed it. He carried it like scripture, and at this moment, in this small space, with no witnesses except Ryan, he believed he had full authority. Aisha looked at the badge still clenched in her hand. Judge, Fulton County Superior Court. Her own courtroom was only steps away. Her name was on the door. Her voice was expected to bring order that morning. But instead, here she was, being detained at the very entrance to justice. There was a bitter irony in it, one that she could taste. She said quietly, "Officer, I am due to preside over a racial profiling case in 10 minutes. Please think carefully. Your body camera is on." Derek smirked. It was not. He had turned it off as soon as he approached her. He did not answer. Instead, he stepped closer. Aisha felt her chest tighten, but her face remained composed. She had trained her emotions for years. She knew control better than most, but even she could not stop the memory that rose in her mind. The memory of her brother. His hands were raised, his voice calm. His life ended by men just like Derek. In that memory, she was 16, standing beside a hospital bed, a sheet pulled over a face she loved. The room was too quiet. Her mother's knees gave out. Her father placed a hand over his own mouth to stop a sound from escaping. And Aisha learned that justice did not always arrive. Sometimes, justice had to be forced to show up. That moment shaped her, not into bitterness, but into purpose. Back in the present, the tension held like a wire stretched thin. Ryan swallowed hard. His conscience flickered like a weak flame. He whispered, "Derek, we should call this in." "We should back off," Derek snapped. "You want to lose your job today? Because that's how you lose it. They teach you to hesitate. They'll own you." Ryan went quiet, not because he agreed, but because fear often wins when courage arrives without warning. Aisha watched this unfold with a painful familiarity. She spoke again. Slow, calm, even. "You both know this is unlawful detention. You know who I am now. The only question is what you decide to do with that knowledge." Derek's jaw tightened. Authority, control, power. Those were his armor. He never imagined being challenged by someone like her. At that moment, another voice cut through the tension. Strong, steady, familiar. What in God's name is going on here? Sergeant Elijah Brooks stepped into view. His voice carried weight, experience, leadership, and something more personal. He recognized Aisha instantly. His posture changed. He moved directly between her and Derek, pushing Derek's hand away from her with a firm, decisive motion. Elijah's eyes were sharp as he spoke. Judge Thompson has every right to be here. She is presiding in courtroom 3 this morning. The fact that you put your hands on her is beyond unacceptable. Derek's face darkened with humiliation. His grip tightened on the gun for a second longer than necessary before he finally lowered it. Aisha exhaled only once, quietly. She did not thank Elijah. She did not need to. Their connection went deeper, years ago, after her brother's death. Elijah had been the only officer willing to testify against the men involved. He paid a price for that. He did not rise quickly. He did not get favored assignments, but he kept his integrity, and that made his presence here more than coincidence. Elijah looked at Derek directly and said, with slow emphasis, "We've talked about this before. You were warned. I reported you. And now this." Derek's eyes flickered. A small crack formed in his confidence. He had been reported before. He knew it. And now there would be no hiding. Aisha straightened her posture. She did not look shaken, only resolved. She walked past Derek and Ryan without another word. Her heels struck the floor with calm rhythm. She was late, but she was not broken. Ryan watched her leave, guilt heavy in his chest. Derek watched with hatred that came from fear. Elijah followed, staying close. Inside, the courthouse awaited her judgment. The case of Jamal Carter, a young man arrested for filming police interactions, would begin within minutes. The weight of the morning rested on her shoulders, but she had carried heavier burdens before. She stepped into her chambers briefly, her hand pressing against the desk she had sat behind 1,000 times. She closed her eyes. The image of her brother's face flickered again. The cold sheet, the silence. She opened her eyes. She had a job to do, and she would do it without trembling. When she entered the courtroom, all rose. Respect was automatic here, but today, it felt different. She had earned her calm the hard way. "Court is now in session," she said, her voice steady, clear, and the story began. Jamal Carter sat at the defense table with his hands folded, his expression calm but wounded in a way that showed the days he spent in holding had carved something into him that would not leave easily. Judge Aisha Thompson watched him carefully, not with sympathy, but with understanding that ran deep, quiet, and steady. The courtroom air held tension that did not need words. The prosecutor, Maya Rivera, rose first. Her voice was firm, measured. She laid out the charge. Jamal had been arrested in East Atlanta while filming police interactions on his phone, something fully legal, yet treated as suspicious and dangerous. He was detained for 48 hours without cause. The arrest record stated he was loitering with intent, a phrase so vague it could be molded into anything the arresting officers wanted it to be. Maya spoke clearly. This is not just a question of one incident. This is a question of a pattern where simple recording becomes provocation, where presence becomes threat, where identity becomes accusation. Victor Lang, the defense attorney representing the officers, rose slowly. He was a man with years of courtroom confidence. His voice carried careful politeness. He called the arrest a misunderstanding, insisting the officers were responding to a reported disturbance. His tone was clean, strategic, and non-confrontational. Yet the courtroom sensed the quiet coldness behind it. Aisha listened to both sides without revealing anything. Her face gave no sign of what had happened outside moments earlier. She had trained her expression into stillness long ago. After opening statements, Maya called Jamal to testify. He stood, straightened his posture, and walked to the stand with a calm that did not come from peace, but from exhaustion. When he spoke, his voice was low. "I used to believe in the law," he said. "I was in law school. I studied cases, precedents, rights, all of it. I believed that if you followed the rules, kept your voice level, spoke clearly, the system would work. But something changed. Silence held the room." He continued, "I saw too many people like me treated like they were already guilty. I saw my community stop believing that anyone would listen. So I started recording. I recorded to protect people. I recorded to show what happens when no one is watching." He paused. His hands tightened slightly, and I got arrested for it. Victor questioned him with professional calm. "Mr. Carter, is it possible that your behavior appeared confrontational to the officers?" Jamal did not raise his voice. "I was standing on the sidewalk. There is footage of it. I did not shout. I did not interfere. I did not step forward. I simply held my phone." The simplicity of that sentence carried weight. You could feel the jury absorbing it. Some leaned forward. One or two shifted, uncomfortable. Not because of Jamal's words, but because they recognized their familiarity. This was not a dramatic scene. It was something that had happened many times, in many neighborhoods, to many people. Then Maya called Jamal's mother, Lorraine Carter. She walked slowly to the stand, not fragile, but heavy with history. When she began to speak, her voice had a quiet tremor, yet it was steady enough to carry the story of generations. "My father was beaten by police in 1968. He was walking home from work. They said he matched a suspect. He never walked the same after." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "My husband was stopped 7 times in 1 year, driving home from late shifts. We learned to tell our son how to speak, how to stand, how to breathe when the police were near." She looked toward Jamal. "We taught him to survive. But I never thought I'd see him in a jail cell for holding a phone." Her testimony was not loud. It did not need to be. The weight was in the truth it carried. One juror, Carla Jenkins, felt something shift inside her. It was small, but real. She did not know it yet. But this was the moment her neutrality began to unravel. Throughout the proceedings, Aisha's mind flickered to her own family. She remembered her brother's voice, his laughter, the way he tried to calm the officers who surrounded him, how still he became at the end. She pushed the memory back each time, because she could not allow it to color her judgment. Yet the pain lived beneath her ribs, familiar, patient, and awake. She breathed slowly to keep her voice steady as she guided the questioning. During a recess, Aisha stepped briefly into her chambers. Sophia Lee, her court clerk, followed. Sophia was usually quiet, careful with her words, but today she spoke softly. "Judge, I saw what happened outside. I just want to say I'm glad you're safe." Aisha nodded, acknowledging but not dwelling. "Thank you." "Sophia, let's keep the record clean today." Sophia understood. Silence often protects dignity. Court resumed. The last witness for the day was an expert in police procedure who explained that recording officers is not only legal, but protected, and that the officer's justification did not meet professional standards. Victor attempted to counter by suggesting rapid decision-making under stress, but even his tone lacked conviction. He sensed something shifting as well, and though he continued to defend his clients, a quiet doubt began to grow in him. As the day closed, Aisha addressed the courtroom. "We will reconvene tomorrow. The court reminds all present to maintain order and respect the proceedings." Her voice remained even. No tremor, no hint of what she endured that very morning. Jamal looked at her once before being escorted out. It was not a plea for help. It was recognition. One human being seeing another who had walked a parallel road. Outside the courtroom, a few murmurs rose into the hallway. People had begun to talk, reporters gathered, and somewhere in that shifting air, a story was forming. Aisha knew the days ahead would not be simple. Justice rarely moves quickly, and it never moves without resistance. She returned to her chambers, sat slowly in her chair, and let herself breathe. The weight of the morning, the trial, the memory of her brother, the gun at her head. All of it sat with her. But she did not break. She had learned long ago that some battles are fought in silence. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathered herself, and prepared for the next day, when the first day of trial ended. The courthouse did not quiet the way it usually did. Conversations lingered in corners. Eyes followed Aisha as she walked. She felt none of the scrutiny on her face. Her expression remained composed. But inside, she felt a slow, familiar pressure rising. She made her way toward her chambers when she heard Sergeant Elijah Brooks call her name. His voice was steady, but it carried concern. He stepped inside with her, and only when the door closed behind them did he allow the truth to show. "Derek and Ryan," he said. "This isn't their first time." He did not speak quickly. He did not dramatize. He simply laid the facts on the table. 2 years ago, they stopped a teenager outside a convenience store. Same language, same pattern. I filed a complaint. It was dismissed. The department decided to limit conflict instead of addressing it. Aisha listened carefully. Her jaw tightened, but not from surprise. She had expected something like this. Elijah continued, "I have reason to believe there are others, but there was no proof, no footage. That word carried weight now. Footage, proof, witness, evidence. So many cases lived and died on those things. And this one was no different." As they spoke, Jordan Ellis, a local reporter, was finishing an article that would be published within the hour. Jordan was young, sharp, and experienced in covering racial justice cases. He had seen enough in his work to know when a story carried more than legal intrigue. He sensed something deeper. He phrased his headline carefully, but the message was unmistakable. A black judge oversees case about racial profiling after being profiled herself. He did not reveal what happened outside the courthouse that morning. He did not need to. The suggestion alone was enough to create movement. By late afternoon, small groups began to gather outside, not a crowd, not yet, but murmurs. Someone held a sign. Someone recorded a video saying, "We need to show up." The air was shifting. Meanwhile, Jamal sat in his holding cell, silent. His hands folded the same way they had been at the defense table. He was not angry. He was tired. Tyrone Mitchell, his closest friend, visited him briefly. Tyrone carried a different kind of weight. He was restless, pacing, speaking quickly. "I have something," he whispered. "I didn't tell them yet, not the lawyers, not the court. But I have it. A camera across from the liquor store. It caught everything. It shows Derek deleting the patrol footage. It shows what really happened." Jamal looked at him with a heaviness that came from caution and hope interwoven. "Why didn't you bring it sooner?" Tyrone's voice broke slightly. "Because they came to my house. Someone knocked at my window the night you got arrested. They left no note, no voice, just presence. I was scared. Man." Jamal placed a hand on Tyrone's shoulder. "Do you have it now?" Tyrone nodded. "Yes, and I'm ready to bring it forward." While this was unfolding, Derek and Ryan sat in their patrol car a few blocks away. Derek's anger had hardened over the day. His jaw clenched again and again. He replayed the courthouse incident like a wound that refused to close. To him. Aisha had not just challenged him, she had humiliated him. He believed power was his right, and when that was questioned, he felt exposed. Ryan watched him closely. There was something fragile in Derek's anger now, something cracking, something desperate. Ryan's phone vibrated. It was a text from his wife. "We need to talk. I saw the coverage. I need you to tell me the truth." He stared at the words, his chest tightening. His wife was biracial. Her family had faced the same profiling he now stood accused of participating in. He felt the consequences closing in. Derek noticed, scoffed, and shook his head. "Don't start getting soft now. They're the ones causing trouble, not us." Ryan did not answer. The silence between them was no longer partnership. It was fracture. Sophia Lee, the court clerk, stayed late in her office, sorting documents. She replayed the moment she overheard Derek's phone call earlier in the day. He had spoken sharply into the phone, whispering but urgent. He better shut his mouth. "I don't care how." She knew now he had been talking about Tyrone. She did not consider herself brave. She did not seek conflict. But there are moments when silence becomes its own kind of violence. She opened her drawer, took out her personal phone, and recorded a statement describing what she overheard. She did not share it yet, but she preserved it. She understood how justice sometimes requires preparation long before action. That night, Aisha sat in her home office, alone with her thoughts. She did not turn on the television. She did not check news. She stared at a photograph of her brother. He had a wide, open smile, a smile that still felt like sunlight. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke aloud, though no one was there to hear it. "We keep going." It was not a declaration. It was a promise she had been living for decades. The next morning, the courthouse parking lot was not quiet. The small murmurs had grown into a collective presence. People held signs. Some chanted. Some simply stood. Jordan's report had reached thousands overnight, and though the protest was peaceful, tension lived in the air like a low hum. Aisha entered through a secured entrance, not out of fear, but to avoid distraction. Inside, the trial resumed. Tyrone arrived. He walked slowly, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted with quiet resolve. When he took the stand, he did not dramatize, he did not raise his voice, he simply stated the truth. "I have video evidence that shows what happened." Gasps rose, controlled but unmistakable. Victor's face changed. Derek and Ryan felt the shift like a door closing behind them. Sophia stepped forward to authenticate the timestamps for the first time. The courtroom could see the pattern Elijah had spoken of. Outside, the crowd thickened, voices lifted, and though the courthouse walls were solid, the sound rose faintly through them. Change had begun, not sudden, not complete, but unmistakable. The courtroom settled into a tense stillness as Tyrone's video played on the screen, every person watching with steady, unblinking focus. The footage showed the street outside the East Atlanta store in clear detail. Even though there was no sound, it captured Derek and Ryan stopping Jamal, questioning him, taking his phone, placing him in cuffs while he stood calm the entire time. Then the most damning moment, Derek stepping to the back of the patrol car, opening the device panel, and deleting the body camera footage. No hesitation, no confusion, no uncertainty, an act of intention. The room seemed to tighten as the sequence looped a second time. The jury watched quietly, and something changed in their eyes. It wasn't shock, it was recognition. They had seen stories like this before, but now it was right in front of them, undeniable. The juror Carla Jenkins felt something in her chest that she could not push away this time. Not doubt, not outrage, something like clarity. Meanwhile, Tyrone sat on the stand, shoulders straight, hands folded, his voice steady as Maya asked him questions. "Did you alter this footage?" "No." "Did you record it?" "No. It comes from a neighborhood security camera. I retrieved it." "Why didn't you present it immediately?" His voice thinned slightly. Because I was scared. It was not an excuse. It was truth. Maya nodded once. She understood fear like that. Many people in the room did. Victor Lang rose to question Tyrone, but his tone had shifted from confident defense to something quieter, thoughtful, conflicted. He asked only 2 questions. Is there anything shown here that is inconsistent with your memory of that day? Tyrone answered. No. And then, are you presenting this today because you want the truth to be heard? Tyrone nodded. Yes. Victor sat back down, his face strained by something internal, a crack in his allegiance, a shift in his understanding. He was beginning to see the case not as a legal argument, but as a human wrong carried out in daylight. Aisha saw it too. She did not smile, she did not react, but she recognized the moment a person begins to face himself. Then Sophia Lee stepped forward to verify the timestamps. She spoke with careful precision, her voice level and steady, confirming the footage's authenticity based on public system logs and city-run camera registration. Her professionalism made the evidence not only compelling, but irrefutable. Outside, the crowd had grown. What had been dozens was now hundreds. Signs lifted, voices rose. The footage had gone live through a reporter's streamed update. People were not just reacting to a trial. They were reacting to a pattern they had lived their entire lives. Jordan Ellis stood with his microphone raised, speaking calmly but clearly. This case represents more than one incident. It represents the system itself, and people are responding because they have seen this story before. As the crowd grew louder, pressure built against the courthouse steps. Police formed a line outside, not aggressively, but in a defensive stance. But tension is a fragile thing, and it only takes one spark to shift its shape. Someone shouted, someone pushed. Not much, not loud, but enough for others to respond. A ripple traveled through the crowd. Voices rose. People surged forward. Nothing organized, nothing planned, just years of frustration rising all at once. It was not yet chaos, but it was no longer calm. Inside the courtroom, the noise began to seep in. Aisha paused the proceedings and looked toward security. Elijah stepped forward, speaking quietly to her. It's not safe to keep the trial open right now. We need to recess. Aisha nodded once. She addressed the room. This court will temporarily suspend session. All parties remain prepared to resume when conditions allow. Her tone remained composed, steady, but everyone felt the shift. She stood, prepared to exit through the side corridor. But as she opened the door, someone from the hallway rushed forward, an activist overcome with emotion, shouting about justice, about anger, about pain. Security acted quickly, stepping between Aisha and the man, restraining him before he could touch her. Aisha did not flinch, not because she did not feel fear, but because she had learned long ago how to stay still in the presence of danger. Elijah placed a hand near her shoulder, guiding her back with controlled precision. The courtroom emptied carefully. People moved with a nervous hush, aware of the sound outside rising into something like a storm. Tyrone exited under escort. Jamal was returned to custody only for safety, not punishment. Victor left quietly, his steps slow, the case unfolding inside him in ways that would not resolve quickly. Derek and Ryan were moved separately. Derek looked furious, cornered. Ryan looked pale, his breathing shallow. The consequences he never imagined now unmistakably real. Aisha returned to her chambers only once the hallway cleared. She sat down slowly, her hands resting on the desk. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to hide from the moment, but to gather herself. Outside her window, sirens rose faintly. She felt the city breathing in anger, grief, and long memory. She opened her eyes again, This moment was exactly why she had become a judge, not for calm courts, not for orderly cases, but for the moments when justice must endure under pressure. Today, justice had not yet arrived, but she could feel it drawing closer, piece by piece, inch by inch, and she was not going to step back. The next morning, the courtroom felt different, not louder, but heavier, as if the weight of what had been revealed now sat on every shoulder in the room. Judge Aisha Thompson entered without hesitation, her posture steady, her robe falling naturally around her, her expression composed but resolute. The trial resumed, and Maya Rivera rose first to call Officer Derek Hayes to the stand. Derek walked with forced confidence, his jaw set, his eyes sharp with defiance. He sat, swore in, and adjusted himself as though preparing to perform rather than testify. Maya began, her voice slow and precise. Officer Hayes, did you delete the patrol car footage on the day of Mr. Carter's arrest? Derek replied immediately, dismissively. No. The footage malfunctioned. Maya did not blink. She let silence stretch just long enough to expose the weakness of the answer. Then she played the security video again. The moment where Derek's hand reached into the patrol unit's recording panel, the courtroom watched in complete stillness. Derek's jaw clenched. His posture tightened. He said, "That video is taken out of context." Maya's voice did not lift or sharpen. "The context is that you deleted evidence." Derek spoke louder now. "It was malfunctioning before I touched it." His voice rose, strained. The jury watched him, not the screen. They saw the way his confidence cracked under the simplest pressure. And Maya continued, calm and deliberate. "Officer Hayes, have you been the subject of previous complaints regarding racial profiling?" Victor, his attorney, rose to object, out of instinct more than conviction, but the objection lacked strength. The judge allowed the question. Derek paused, visibly unsettled. "Complaints don't mean guilt," he said. "They were dismissed," Maya replied. "Dismissed does not mean unfounded." The jury heard the line clearly. Derek shifted again, and the room recognized what was happening. Power, once unquestioned, was slipping. Then Ryan Caldwell was called to testify. Ryan's demeanor was different. His shoulders were tense, his voice uneven, his eyes downcast. He answered questions softly, hesitating more often than Derek had. When Maya asked him directly, "Did you know the footage was deleted?" he froze. For a moment. No one in the room breathed. Then Ryan said quietly, "Yes." The confession landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Derek's head snapped toward him. His voice burst out. "What are you doing?" Ryan didn't look back. His voice cracked, but he continued. "I didn't stop him. I should have. And I'm sorry. It was not a defense. It was truth, raw, fractured, costly." The courtroom absorbed the moment. Some jurors blinked slowly, affected not by Ryan's apology itself, but by the humanity inside it. It was imperfect, incomplete, too late, but real. Derek slammed his hand against the table. "You coward." Aisha lifted her voice, firm, steady, order. But Derek was unraveling, his composure collapsing under public exposure. He stood abruptly, pointing at Aisha with a trembling finger, his anger wild and uncontained. "You think you're better than me? You think you have the right to judge me? You had this planned. You set this up." His voice cracked in frustration and something like desperation. Elijah moved forward, ready to intervene if needed. Aisha did not stand, did not raise her voice. She spoke with controlled calm. "Officer Hayes, sit down." Derek's chest heaved, his face flushed, for a moment. He considered refusing, but the room was no longer his. He sat, slowly, because power had shifted. Then the most unexpected moment of the trial occurred. Victor Lang, the defense attorney, rose, but not with another objection, not to deflect. His voice was low, almost tired. "Your Honor," he said, "the defense would like to submit new evidence." The courtroom held still. Victor looked directly at Maya, then at Aisha, then finally at the jury. "I received internal department communications late last night, emails from the chain of command instructing these officers to prioritize public confidence over transparency. In plain terms, image protection, suppress complaints, avoid reports that might damage the department." Derek stared at him in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Victor continued. "I have spent my career defending the system as though it were always correct, as though its intentions were always fair. But this case has made something clear. Justice cannot be served if the truth is obstructed at its foundation." The courtroom was silent in a way that carried reverence. Victor placed printed emails into evidence. They contained instructions from superiors advising officers to maintain narrative consistency and ensure recording equipment does not create liability. The meaning could not be misunderstood. Maya delivered her closing argument last. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture dramatically. She simply spoke truth that every person in the room felt in their bones. This case is not about one arrest. It is about a pattern of presumption, a belief that some people are a threat before they speak, before they move, before they breathe. And that belief does not only harm individuals, it harms the rule of law itself. We ask this court to acknowledge what is in front of us: a wrongful arrest, motivated by bias, followed by the deliberate destruction of evidence. That is not misunderstanding. That is misconduct. Derek stared forward, hollow, furious, and unraveling. Ryan looked shattered, guilt tightening his shoulders into a slope. Victor sat silently, his hands folded, his expression somber. The jury listened, each member carrying something new inside them now. Not anger, not pity, understanding. Aisha spoke the final words of the day, her voice clear and unwavering. "This court will deliberate." And as she adjourned, every person in the room knew the truth. The verdict was already forming in their minds. Justice was not complete, but it was no longer distant. It was approaching, steadily, inevitably, piece by piece. When the jury returned to the courtroom the next morning, the tension was not loud or frantic. It was the quiet kind, the kind that settles into bones and slows breathing. Judge Aisha Thompson sat at the bench, composed, her hands still, her face calm, but unreadable. The jurors took their seats, each one carrying a new heaviness. Carla Jenkins sat at the head of the group, not because she wanted to lead, but because something in her had shifted over the past 3 days. She had arrived at the beginning neutral, almost detached, but neutrality had become impossible once the truth was placed directly in her hands. Aisha asked, "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" Carla rose, holding a folded sheet of paper in both hands. Her voice, steady but solemn, filled the room. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom grew still. Aisha nodded once. "Please read the verdict." Carla looked down. "On the charge of wrongful arrest, we find the defendants, Officer Derek Hayes and Officer Ryan Caldwell, guilty." A breath moved through the room. Not relief, not celebration, but recognition. Carla continued, "On the charge of racial discrimination and violation of civil rights, we find the defendants guilty." The jury had spoken not just with the facts, but with conscience. Derek's face went blank. The anger drained for a moment, replaced by something raw and frightened. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. His hands trembled slightly. The first sign of vulnerability seen in him since the trial began. Ryan closed his eyes. He did not cry. He simply let the verdict land. Jamal sat still at the defense table, his head bowed. He did not smile. He did not cheer. He exhaled deeply, as though a weight had been lifted that he had carried for far too long. Lorraine Carter, his mother, placed her hand over her heart, and for the first time in years, she let herself breathe without fear pressing against her chest. Aisha looked out over the room. She spoke, her voice clear and steady, carrying the authority of law and the weight of lived experience. The court hereby orders that the charges against Mr. Jamal Carter are dismissed with prejudice. He is fully exonerated and free to go. Jamal stood, but his legs seemed slow to respond. He walked forward, receiving the final clearance from the bailiff. The sound of his mother's quiet sob reached only a few ears, but it carried more meaning than words ever could. Reporters outside were already broadcasting live. Jordan Ellis stood on the courthouse steps, his voice calm but charged with meaning. A unanimous verdict, a rare moment in which the system acknowledged its own failure. The crowd, which only days before had surged into near chaos, now fell into controlled emotion, not silence, not noise, something steady, purposeful. A chant began, low at first, then rising, "We see you, we see you, we see you." It was not just for Jamal, it was for everyone who had ever been unseen. Inside the courtroom, Aisha remained seated as the room transitioned into movement. Lawyers spoke quietly, papers were gathered. Ryan turned toward Derek, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Derek did not respond. His face had shifted into something distant and fractured. The consequences had finally arrived, and he was not prepared to carry them. Then Derek looked directly at Aisha, his voice strained with something like desperation. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But the words were hollow, detached from accountability. Aisha's gaze did not waver. Meaning has nothing to do with action. You made choices, and those choices caused harm. Today, accountability is here. Derek's expression faltered. Not indignation, not defiance, just the slow recognition that there was no further place to hide. Ryan was escorted out first, not in handcuffs, but under watch. Pending departmental review and sentencing recommendations, Derek followed, wrists bound, each step heavy. The courtroom watched silently. There was no applause, no cheering. Justice does not celebrate. Justice simply moves forward. Jamal stepped toward Aisha. He did not speak immediately. When he finally did, his voice was soft. "Thank you." Aisha shook her head gently. "Do not thank me. The truth did the work. You simply survived long enough for it to be heard." His eyes welled, not from weakness, but release. He nodded, understanding the depth of her words, the history beneath them, the weight shared but differently lived. As the courthouse emptied, Elijah approached Aisha. He spoke in a tone that carried both exhaustion and respect. "You held the line." Aisha looked toward the doorway where Derek had been taken. "The line has to hold even when our hands shake." Elijah nodded. He knew her hands had shaken far earlier in life, and she had learned to steady them through pain no courtroom could see. News spread across Atlanta, then across Georgia, then across the country. The verdict sparked dialogue, real dialogue, not the kind that evaporates in headlines, but the kind spoken around kitchen tables, barbershops, church steps, classrooms. Not everyone agreed, not everyone understood, but conversations began, and conversations are where change begins. Later that evening, Aisha sat alone in her office. The courthouse was quieter now. The protests outside had calmed into conversation circles. Someone prayed aloud, someone handed out water, someone listened. Aisha closed her eyes, not in relief, but in reflection. Justice had been served. Yes, But justice was not the end. It was only a step. The work was ongoing. Always. She stood, gathered her files, and turned off the light. The hallway echoed softly beneath her steps. She did not feel triumphant. She felt steady. The verdict had not healed the world, but it had opened a door. And Aisha knew she would walk through it again tomorrow, after the verdict. Consequences did not fall all at once. They came in waves, steady and unavoidable, shaping the lives of those involved in different ways. Officer Derek Hayes was terminated from the force within 48 hours. The paperwork signed with a level of finality that he had never imagined would bear his name. The news spread across local stations, then national broadcasts, each report showing the same courtroom image of Derek's face, once smug with certainty, now hollow and exhausted. He returned to a small apartment he rarely used, because he had once spent most of his time at the precinct, believing the badge defined his worth. Now, the silence in those rooms felt oppressive. His wife had already left 3 months earlier, worn down by his anger, tired of defending a man who refused to see his own reflection. She did not answer his calls. The divorce papers would come soon. The police union provided him with a lawyer. But even they had limits when public sentiment shifted. Then came the civil suit. Jamal Carter filed for damages totaling $500,000, and this time, the department did not shield Derek. They placed the responsibility on him. His assets were examined. His financial future cracked open like glass. His father, once his greatest influence, called him only once. The conversation was short, bitter. "You disgraced the family name," the older man said. But Derek, for the first time, felt something break differently. Not anger outward, but something collapsing inward. He did not argue. He simply hung up the phone. Within weeks, he entered a mandated program, bias rehabilitation and accountability counseling. The sessions were not gentle. They required confrontation, reflection, acknowledgement. The first time the counselor asked, "What did you see when you looked at Judge Thompson?" Derek had no answer. Silence sat with him, heavy and undeniable. Ryan Caldwell faced a different path. He was suspended without pay, pending an internal review that would determine whether he would keep his badge. He returned home to his wife, who did not meet him at the door. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands clasped, her eyes tired. When he tried to speak, she raised a hand to stop him. "All these years," she said, "I believed you were different. I believed you saw me, saw my family, saw the world the way I needed you to." Her voice trembled, but she did not cry. "And now I don't know who you are." Ryan sat across from her, his shoulders bent, his voice quiet. "I didn't stop him. I knew it was wrong. I didn't stop him." She nodded once. "I know." Silence followed, long, unfamiliar, painful. She did not leave him. But she did not forgive him either. Forgiveness, she said, would require time, consistency, and truth, not from the courtroom, but from him, at work. Officers who once shared laughter with him now avoided his eyes. Some whispered, some glared, a few silently conflicted themselves, offered no reaction at all. Ryan realized that his greatest punishment was not the suspension. It was the weight of recognizing that he could have done better and chose not to. He wrote a letter to the court, not for appeal, not for record, but because he needed to put words somewhere. It said, "I saw harm and said nothing. Silence does damage too." Whether anyone read it was not the point. The point was that he finally saw the truth in himself. Victor Lang, the defense attorney, felt the trial follow him long after the courtroom emptied. Colleagues approached him, some quietly respectful, others confused, a few critical. He had broken an unspoken rule of professional distance. Yet, for the first time in years, he felt aligned with his own conscience. He began to speak publicly about reform, about responsibility, about the difference between protecting law and protecting justice. Some listened, some dismissed him, but he continued, because he could no longer pretend the two were always the same. As for Jamal, his life did not become instantly easy or whole. Trauma does not dissolve in the moment of victory. Yet he stepped into the air outside the courthouse feeling something he had not felt in years. Forward movement. He and his mother sat on a bench nearby, not speaking for a long time. They simply existed, side by side, breathing the same steady rhythm. Jamal knew the fight was not over, but he also knew he was not alone in it. And finally, there was Aisha. She did not celebrate. She did not rest in triumph. She understood that justice delivered once does not solve the system that produced injustice in the first place. One evening, weeks after the verdict, she left the courthouse later than usual and found Derek waiting outside. Not aggressive, not angry, simply present. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way a person looks after realizing their life has been built on something that cannot hold weight. He spoke quietly. I didn't understand. I thought I did, but I didn't. Aisha did not respond with comfort or sharpness. She listened. Derek continued. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know if I deserve it. I just needed to say I am sorry. The apology was imperfect. It arrived late, but it was real enough to stand in the air without being dismissed. Aisha nodded once. Not acceptance, not rejection, simply acknowledgement that accountability had begun. She turned and walked away. Not because she lacked compassion, but because her work was not to heal Derek. Her work was to protect the ones who came after. Ryan, in time, would write an apology too. His wife never told him whether she believed it fully. Some wounds require time to decide whether to close, and the city, watching all of this from a wider distance, began to shift as well, not in sudden transformation, but in slow, deliberate recognition that justice is not a single moment. It is a direction one must walk, again and again, even when the road is long, in the weeks that followed. Life did not suddenly transform into celebration or clarity. Instead, it moved forward with a quiet steadiness that spoke to the long distance between justice delivered once and justice sustained. Judge Aisha Thompson continued her work each day, walking into the courthouse with the same composed posture and measured presence she had always carried. But inside, something had settled differently. There was no victory in her expression, only resolve. The case had ended, but what it represented did not end with it. Conversations began within legal circles, community groups, police precincts, churches, schools, homes, places where people had long avoided certain topics because they were too heavy or too familiar. Now those topics had names: Jamal Carter, Derek Hayes, Ryan Caldwell, and there was no longer space to pretend the system functioned without bias. Aisha met with Lorraine and Jamal 2 weeks after the verdict, in her chambers, door closed, sunlight low, not to discuss court matters, but to talk about what came next. Jamal spoke with a quiet certainty that had not been present before. I want to start something, he said, not just protests, something organized, something sustainable. Aisha listened closely. Not reaction. She said, foundation. He nodded. Yes, education, legal workshops, youth outreach, a place where people learn how to stand before the harm happens. Lorraine squeezed her son's hand. Your voice is clear now, she said softly. Use it. Aisha agreed to support the formation of the organization, not as a public figure, but as a legal advisor who understood how systems respond, resist, and sometimes bend. The group would be called the Carter Initiative for Community Accountability. It started small, but it would grow. It would teach young people how to record safely, how to speak clearly in dangerous encounters, how to advocate for themselves and others. It would train volunteers to attend hearings, monitor proceedings, file complaints that could not be buried quietly. It would plant seeds of change where change had always been slow to take root. Meanwhile, Georgia legislators introduced a new anti-profiling bill. Citing the Carter trial as a catalyst, it did not pass easily. Debates stretched long into the night, but public pressure had shifted, and pressure has a way of creating openings where there were none. In the end, the bill moved forward. Not perfect, not complete, but real. A first step. Elijah Brooks continued working within the department, not with the illusion that he could fix everything, but with the steady belief that progress comes through persistence, not declarations. He began meeting with younger officers, talking not about tactics or protocol, but about what it means to see another human being fully, without assumption or inherited bias. Some listened, some dismissed him, but he kept speaking, because someone had to. Ryan Caldwell attended reform sessions regularly. He did not speak much in those meetings, but he showed up every time, not because the department required it, though they did, but because he knew something in him needed to change. His wife watched him carefully. She did not forgive him quickly. She did not forget. But she did notice that his silence was no longer avoidance. It was reflection. One night, he told her, "I should have stopped him, and I didn't. I understand that now." She did not respond with comfort. She simply nodded. Accountability sometimes looks like that. Not dramatic absolution, but small acknowledgments that shift the ground beneath a person slowly. Derek, in contrast, struggled in his rehabilitation program. For weeks, he fought against the idea of responsibility, clinging to anger because it was easier than grief. But grief finds cracks. And one day, during a session, he finally spoke the sentence he had never allowed himself to say. "I was afraid," the counselor asked. Afraid of what? Derek stared at the floor, afraid of not being in control. That admission did not excuse his actions. It did not undo harm. But it was the first time he had spoken from truth instead of ego. Healing, if it ever came, would be slow. Perhaps years, perhaps never fully. But the door had opened, and opening is where change begins. As months passed, Jamal's initiative gained volunteers, students, retired teachers, community leaders, quiet citizens who had never attended a protest but had always wanted to help someone. Somehow, meetings were simple, conversations honest. People arrived tired and left steadier. The work was not grand. It was consistent. And consistency is what changes communities. On a quiet afternoon near the end of autumn, Aisha visited the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. She stood before the statue, not to seek inspiration. She already carried that. But to reflect, she thought of her brother, of his laughter, of the life he deserved to have lived. She thought of Jamal, of the day she saw him walk free. She thought of Lorraine, still carrying history with unbroken dignity. She thought of Derek, unraveling and learning, of Ryan, rebuilding piece by piece, of Elijah, steady as ever, of the jury. Each one changed in their own small private way. She thought of the cost of justice, the cost she had carried, the cost others would continue to carry. She closed her eyes and breathed in slowly. Not relief, not sorrow, something steadier than both. Purpose. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, not to the statue, not to the city, but to the memory she kept close. We keep going. And she did. They all did. Not because the world was fixed, but because the work was only beginning. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. If it touched you, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them.